Welcome to Nerd Files. In this video, I will explain different ways that you can begin a D&D campaign to excite your players and benefit future sessions. There are a multitude of ways to begin your D&D campaign. The opening few minutes are what sets the tone and feel of the campaign for your players, drawing them in or potentially leaving them uninterested. I have found that the first session is extremely important for a campaign. If you can start well, you can draw your players in, keeping them eager for the next session. If you can do this, then it makes DMing more fun, and your players also have more fun. But if you start off a campaign poorly, you can still recover and find ways to interest your players, but it likely won't beat the effects of an intriguing or well-done beginning. The beginning of a campaign doesn't exactly have to be overall important to the plot, but it should be interesting and set up the adventure. 9 times out of 10, an action-oriented beginning is going to draw in your players a lot more than one with a lot of plot and story, considering that they've just started and are new to the world and your campaign. Beginning right off the bat with an action sequence is a reliable way to get your players interested. People like action, and a good fight or exciting event at the very beginning will pique their interest and almost always ensure a good first session. The very first sentence of your campaign can throw the players right into a fight, forcing them to divert their attention and energy to the game from the very start. This works especially well if a small conflict or fight is what sets off the adventure. Once the fight is done, the players are thrown into the campaign, going from one exciting thing to another. Another reliable and similar way to begin a campaign starts a little slower but still quickly gets into the action. This is how many DMs begin campaigns in my experience, with the characters being introduced, a threat or goal established, followed by some action or excitement to get the story moving or simply to keep your players happy. Often this will take the form of the party meeting up at the very beginning, and then suddenly an action sequence sets them off on their adventure. This gives time for the players to describe themselves and show their personalities before they get into the action, and the story picks up. If you begin a campaign with a lot of explanations, descriptions, plot lines, and stories, this can kill the excitement, at least for newer or more casual players. There are some people that love this kind of intrigue, and this kind of start can work for a more political or mystery-based campaign. However, a lot of these details will be lost on them at the beginning, and it's better if you tell these things later once they've sunk more into their characters and the world, and will remember new information better. So, if you want a campaign with a lot of plot, twist, political intrigue, and the like, it's best to start simple with the already mentioned tricks, and let the story unfold from there, adding plot lines that benefit the story and characters. Players like when you manage to utilize their backstory into your campaign, since it feels more character-driven that way, and they also feel more a part of your world. However, something to keep in mind when beginning a campaign is that the players are ultimately what determines the course of the game. Forcing them to make decisions takes the fun out of it, and is something you want to try and avoid as DM. There's no end to stories about people complaining about DMs that railroad the story, so you definitely want to maintain flexibility, but also stay organized. Whatever tricks you employ to uphold these things may vary, and I will go over it more in future videos. But it helps to plan things out, as well as have a backup plan, and keep an open mind to what players may do that changes the flow of the story. Something else you should do, especially if you change your mind a lot like me, is to not reveal too much at the beginning. This is especially useful for if you have a final boss or threat that hasn't been very well established yet, so that you may change your mind along the way freely and change it to fit the encounter like when the time comes. Revealing too much information in the beginning of a campaign or early on can be a real pain if you end up not using it and wanting to change it later, which would only lead to contradictions. If you are playing in a really long or epic campaign that would unfold into a large story, another good way to have it begin is to have the players start separately. This is more difficult and likely requires more experienced players and DMs that have a good grasp of game mechanics. However, it's a good way to start a campaign with a lot of plot points or to emphasize a big world, and set up multiple locations that players can travel to later. If your campaign also deals with a widespread threat, or is an especially long game, this kind of start is a way to show said threat in multiple places. Furthermore, there's the excitement building for the players to finally meet, and when that happens, that can allow for a session with cool reveals, revelations, and is a great opportunity to throw in a good combat sequence. This also allows for good character development throughout, although keep in mind that not all players will be super interested in the story, and more so in the action and intrigue, so this is for a more select audience. There are plenty of other ways to start campaigns, and you can find more, so I won't go over an endless amount of different ideas. It may vary from person to person, so some of these things may be more important to me when I am running a campaign than to somebody with a different style, but hopefully this gave you a good idea of what to do and what to expect when starting a D&D campaign, and just things to generally keep in mind.